Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Keith.
How are you?
How are you? Nice to meet you, finally.
You too.
It's a real pleasure. Heard so many good things.
Hopefully they're all true. Hopefully.
I
So,
sure I bet they are.
so you are moving into the president role?
Yes. From the end of well, actually it was going to be at the end of the year, but Alex unfortunately has is having to leave us. He has other commitments that have kind of come
Hmm.
up. So he just kind of said, well, I think I've been, handling the leadership, for the last year and a half. So it's time I kind of step back a little bit. We definitely appreciate his leadership and all that he's done for the chapter. And it's going to be a big shoe to fill, but, I'm excited and looking forward to doing the very best I can to at least maintain the momentum that we've been able to create so far. So
Excellent.
real pleasure meeting you and getting to know you. Hopefully I see you do a lot. I was reading your bio. You're currently doing a PhD?
I am at Penn.
Penn? Okay.
I don't know that it's something I can recommend.
Why not?
Um, I mean, to be blunt, for the money that it
Right.
costs for the program, I think that you can get the same quality elsewhere. It
Okay.
like most education, what you put into it, you're going to get out of it.
Right.
But the you're paying for the name.
Pretty much. That's just it.
And I was more interested in Pepperdine or Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt actually has a pretty good online program, and it was half the cost. But my company not sort of, they required me to go to Penn if I wanted them to contribute.
Right.
So financially, it just made more sense to do that. But when I'm talking to other people, the program's nice, but especially if you are a learning and development professional,
Hmm.
there's a lot of times where I just have to bite my tongue because it's the same stuff I'm either already teaching
Right.
or am already a practitioner in that space. And so it
Right.
can be extremely frustrating. Like we actually spent about 5 hours of class one day talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, and they were explaining what it is and how it
Right.
works. I just thought this is not a good use of
Of my
the amount
time
of money. Yeah, I mean,
and time.
if you're in a chief learning officer program and you don't already have some foundational knowledge of that, you're not in the
Then you
right
shouldn't be.
space.
Right. You have someone who's moderating with us. I have someone trying to join in.
Yes, I don't think
Oops.
that's her though.
Okay. 'Cause I don't want to let people in that are not.
Yeah,
We
let me
don't start until
text her.
12:30. And I just made you a co-host, so that way you also have hosting rights.
Okay.
So that way you
Uh,
can share your screen, you can do a lot of stuff. So did you guys want me to use, because I know you provided a deck,
yes, so
or
I have your slides.
okay,
I'll share my screen. So Tiffany is here. Let me admit her.
okay. And she'll be moderating. So you want me to
Yes.
just be in the background just for,
Yeah, sure.
because I know the initial slide, I didn't know whether you wanted us to do the introductions or that's why I wanted us to kind of.
Hello, Tiffany.
Well, hi. How's it going?
Good. Good, good. So
Good,
this is
good.
Tiffany. Tiffany works
Hi.
with me, General
Okay.
Motors and GP Strategies.
Okay. Hi, Tiffany. Good
Works.
afternoon. How
Works.
are you?
It's like, Keith, do you have something to tell me?
No.
Hi. Good afternoon. I'm
Zizo is
sorry, I
my
didn't
name.
catch your name. I was too busy making fun of Keith. What was that?
Zizo.
Zilo. Oh, good to meet you, Zilo.
Yeah.
Good
So Z-I-Z-O.
afternoon. Zizo. Okay, got it.
Yep.
Ziza, what's the origin of your name?
Nigeria. Nigeria is my background, my
Ah,
initial nationality. I moved here in 2005. I have a
nice,
military
nice.
background, was an air traffic controller in the Nigerian Air Force for 16 years. I did that and
Wow.
then decided to relocate here in 2005. So here I moved in and joined the auto industry, did a little work with Enterprise, of the car rental company in their business development division.
Mm-hmm.
And I transferred over to Kaplan Higher Education Corporation. That's my last employer. I was with them until May of this year.
Oh, okay.
And
One of our coworkers came from Enterprise. I think John Waynicki. I don't think
Okay.
you
so,
necessarily know him. He's been in Michigan.
Oh, okay. I'm in the Orlando, Florida area.
Ah, nice.
so I
Winters
actually,
are much nicer.
I have a house in Ormond Beach or Daytona
Okay.
Beach.
Okay. That's not too far from me.
No, but I live in Toronto now.
Oh, Canada. Okay. That's awesome.
It's a little bit safer than Florida in the U.S.
Yes, right now.
Thanks, Keith, for the reminder.
In case you forgot.
That's awesome.
We never forget.
I haven't been to Canada yet. That's on my bucket list. I'm, hoping to, come vacationing. I haven't decided where yet. We'll see.
I would definitely check out Toronto. I'll show you a quick view in just a moment, as soon as I finish getting set up. So Tiffany, we were just talking about some of the logistics for the day. So the first is, let me just share my screen. And let me know when you can see my screen.
I see your screen.
I can see your screen.
So let me start at the beginning. So as the president, I would love for you to introduce, or just kind of kick off the session so that people can start to build a relationship with you and start to recognize you. So you could just do the quick, welcome to the session for today. Then we'll go to the next slide. This is kind of your team slide, if you will. And then after this, you could, if you just want to quickly, are you comfortable with this slide? Have you seen
I'll just talk about the talent development capability model. It's pretty simple. We have 3 domains: building personal capability, developing professional capability, and impacting organizational capability. So pretty much our focus in the chapter is to, align our programs with this model. And that's why I'm sure Rosa may have mentioned that our focus today is going to be on 2 of these. I think we're looking at, building personal capability and, developing your professional capability. That's where we're drawing from for today's session.
Yep.
Design thinking, theory, and application. That's how it aligns with that. So just give a high-level overview and then move on to the next slide where...
And then you could just hand it off to Tiffany at this point. And you could just say the moderator for today is going to be Tiffany.
You don't have to say my last name. I know it. I know it's a beast. I can say it. You don't have to. Don't even bother with it. It's okay. And then Keith, from here, I can just talk through your bio and then kick it off to you.
As you're talking through, Tiffany, I'm just going to scroll through these couple of slides.
Okay.
And that'll just take a second. And then when we get to this, so I'll stop here for you, and then I'll pick it up.
And then that's when I do your bio, when I see your bow tie. Okay. Bio, bow tie. Got it.
And then a couple of other logistics. So can you also make Tiffany, so let me ask you that first, Tiffany, are you comfortable with breakout rooms? Do you know how to send people to breakout rooms?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you can make Tiffany co-presenter, because we're going to be using breakout rooms today. Except I don't see that function.
Let me see if I can see it on mine.
Go down. It's right down at the bottom. You don't see breakout rooms?
I am not seeing that functionality on mine either. Hang on, let me give it a go. More.
But as long as you see it and you can send people, that's fine.
Yeah, Zizo, I don't see it. I've had this happen before in meetings that I don't set up myself. I'm not sure why it happens, but yeah, I'm not seeing that functionality. Oh, wait, hang on. I do have it. It's, Keith, maybe you can see it now. Under more, it's the ellipsis.
I switched you to the host. I made you the host now, Tiffany.
That's why.
I don't know if that's what
more power.
Yeah, that's
it doesn't give me the option to make. I think we can only have one host. So I made you the host.
So. That's fine, Tiffany. So Tiffany, you'll be host. You have the power.
Whoa.
You have the
Okay.
power, so you'll be able to do most of the work. So now I don't
Okay.
have that. I won't be able, unless if you're not comfortable with doing the breakout rooms, then maybe Keith can.
I'm okay with it. Keith, I don't want you to have to think about anything while you're presenting. So I know that can be really distracting. So for breakout rooms, what's coming up for me automatically is assign 4 participants into X numbers of room, etc. So
Yes. So
I guess I'll just have to do some quick math. So
it'll
automatically,
be
right?
4 participants.
Okay.
Random is fine, and it will be for 7 minutes.
Right.
Okay. I think I will have to just time it just by watching the time, but yeah, no problem.
There should be there should be a time option in there. Yeah.
Let me just try it really quickly. Let me just breakout room 1 options. Oh, I see. Countdown after closing the breakout room. Breakout rooms close automatically after 7 minutes. Oh, look at that. I've never used that function.
That's good. I'm more familiar with Adobe Connect, and Adobe Connect is kind of wonky.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Interesting. So you use that during the day, but you usually use Zoom for ATD, Susan?
Yeah, Zoom. My work, we used Adobe Connect, but for ATD we use Zoom.
Okay.
Right.
We've been using Teams at GP. It works, but sometimes folks on the GM side have trouble with Teams because they're still on Skype, and it can be a little weird.
Right.
Okay, so let me just kind of quickly, Tiffany, run you through where the engagements are.
Sure.
So,
quick question, Keith. Do you want me to hold questions, and are you going to pause at certain sections, or do you want me to ask them as they
I will have Q&A at a couple of key sections. So let me show you where those are, unless there's something that you think is really relevant that needs to be interrupted, but otherwise, and also you're an expert in this area too, which is why you're here. So feel free to answer some of the questions yourself in the chat. Don't feel like you need to wait for me.
Okay. Yeah, I'll try not to disturb you if it's not absolutely critical. I can't imagine that there would be much that's absolutely critical. So interrupt.
So anytime you see a slide with this design, that means it's some sort of engagement activity.
Oh, look at that.
So it'll be green on the right-hand side, and that'll be an indicator. So what I would like is if you can clear, because you have to clear all the annotations after each one. So please make sure to do that.
I will do that. I will wipe them out. Okay. Okay.
So there's knowledge checks throughout as well. So those will need to be cleared.
No problem.
And those will be done with annotations. So knowledge check. So here's the breakout room. So the breakout room will be about 30 minutes in or so.
Okay.
And we'll get to the slide, and I'll explain the slide to everyone, what I want them to do. And then I'll say, all right, here we go. And then Tiffany, please send everybody to breakout rooms. And then you'll send them. They'll come back at the end of 7 minutes. And then we'll talk about what they just did. There will be another knowledge check. And then, so here's a Q&A in case there is any. Then we'll take a 5-minute break.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
I wasn't talking to you, Siri. All right, so then we have a 5-minute break. Then we'll have another knowledge check, more knowledge check, a little chat. Then we move into understanding the phases. Some engagement. Quick story, and then we end with knowledge checks.
How are they responding to that? Are they putting something on the screen?
Yeah, so anytime there's circles, it'll be annotations.
Got it.
I have a file that I want to be able to share, and I can't remember how that works. Or if that works in here. Maybe we might have to email it out.
Good. Let's see.
You could drop it in the chat.
Keith, do you have by any chance a link to?
Oh, I see it. You're right. You just put it in the chat.
Oh, nice.
So,
Okay.
Tiffany, I'm going to email it to you, and then
Sure.
at the end, I'm going to talk about resources, and then if you can put that in the chat.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, Rosa said she'd join us maybe around 1:15. She had a
Good.
engagement, so.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
So I guess the way it was set up, I think we have to admit people into the room. I'm not sure. Since
We do.
Yeah, I see a couple are
since
waiting.
you have hosting rights, that's
Yes.
gonna fall under you. So I will be
No
able to-
problem.
Yeah.
I
So
will just be watching it the whole time.
we'll wait
no
till a
worries.
couple of minutes before.
Yeah.
usually
There are a couple people hanging out. I didn't want them to walk in on our banter, so
right.
we will hold off.
So at the end, Tiffany, I'll have another Q&A, and then we'll switch it back over to you, Zizo, at the very end. If there's still time left, you can
Yeah.
cover these other slides.
Right.
I see my name. I saw my name.
What?
I said I saw my name on that
Yeah,
slide.
there it is.
There's that Wojnowski. Hey, you spelled it right. Good job.
That's Rosa, but yeah.
Oh, it's Rosa. Okay, she did a good
Rosa
job.
prepared the slides, so that's.
Oh, okay. She gets the
Unfortunately,
credit
she's
for
not
that.
here, so, yeah.
Yeah, that looks nice. These are nice looking slides. These are really professional looking.
And
You guys have a good operation.
So in terms of the start time, so we're going to start right at 12:30, regardless of how many people we have, just because this first part, takes a couple minutes, and I want to.
Mhm.
And I'll try to just do high level. I noticed you had a little bit of. I'm not really introducing you, Keith. I noticed we had that in the notes. I'll just welcome everyone into the session, just to introduce, thank them for attending, and then go into our team. I'll just introduce myself, and then talk a little bit about the focus and the talent development capability model, and that's it.
Perfect.
And then I hand it over to
Tiffany here, and then
Excellent.
and then Tiffany, Tiffany, when he hands it over to you here, you can just start. Hey, thanks for joining today. Again, I'm Tiffany. I'm your moderator.
Do I have to use that voice?
Yes, you have to say it just
I
like
would rather
that.
not, but okay. I'm your moderator, and my name is Tiffany.
Exactly.
Oh gosh.
All right, so I think we're all set. So, so Tiffany, you will handle the chat because I'm not going to have it open. So just answer questions, dialogue with people. Keep them engaged throughout the chat.
Yeah. Answer any questions that might come up that I can handle. I will not interrupt you unless it's absolutely critical, which it won't be.
And then just clear the annotations, please.
And if I notice, I'll also be monitoring the chat, just to
help
you.
Thank you, Ziza.
If I notice anything, I'll send you an instant message.
Great.
That way we can have two people keeping an eye on it.
Perfect.
Sounds good.
I will go on mute unless I'm talking, just because I'm going to be possibly typing a lot and clicking a lot. I don't want to add any noise.
I'm just going to step away for just a few minutes.
Sure.
5
Me
minutes.
too.
I'll be back
Do
in
it.
5.
Meet you back here.
Cool.
you should leave it out and ask him. Hey, something came for Hunter Sterling. You know who that is?
Do you remember that envelope, the yellowy orange one that had all the samples for the metal samples when he was in the car?
Isn't it still there?
No, I didn't see it. I thought I left it down there too. It's finally down.
There was a box. It was in that box of stuff, right?
The food that's down there?
No. Behind the driver's seat, there was a box of tiles.
Is it in there? Couldn't possibly move the rug, so I couldn't see.
And it's possible that it fell behind the door, next to the door. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Nice yawn.
Gotta get some energy going.
Yeah. Nice.
Thanks.
All right, I am gonna add in some housekeeping details. So after I just introduce myself as the moderator, I'm just gonna say that.
I have some actually. So
Do
in fact,
you?
what we could do is move that
Oh
if
yeah,
you want.
okay.
If you want to cover this.
I can cover that. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll put it in before me.
And you might be called on. Hey, fair warning at least.
All right. So he'll finish on this slide. Transition to you. Hello and welcome everybody. I am Tiffany, your moderator.
Not using that voice.
Some rules of the road today.
Mhm.
And now let me introduce you.
With great fanfare.
Hold on. We need to find like a clapping sound.
Oh my gosh. We need a cheese ball sound.
What would that be like? An audience soundtrack.
Oh my gosh. Keith. Oh, what's the sound? Let me hear it.
You can't hear it?
What is? That sounds awful. It sounds like a raccoon.
It's audience cheering. Right.
Oh, okay, now I
Don't
hear
like
it.
that.
It sounded like an angry raccoon. I don't know about that. The sound is not playing well. I hear something. Oh, okay. Oh my gosh.
How's that? All right. We'll use
That's
that one.
amazing. Oh
Okay.
my gosh.
We'll use that one.
Whoa. Okay, so hand it over to me. I say hello, and then I say a couple of housekeeping items for this session. And let me just see those bullets around the housekeeping items really fast. Okay, yeah. We'd like to ask you to close out of everything and pay attention to Keith.
But
Switch up.
Zoom.
Ah, right. Somebody's gonna be like, well, I closed out of everything. You told me to. There are some very literal learners out there. Okay. Switch off your mobiles. 5-minute break. Moderator support, that would be me. And please participate. I'm going to just preview that you're going to pause at certain points to collect questions, and that I will try not to be interrupting you. Whoa, don't need to see that. Whoa, Keith. Whoa.
Don't be so literal.
It's not that kind of webinar.
No.
Good thing I didn't admit anyone.
Just a moment.
Whoa. Am I?
We're all adults here.
Apparently we need to be. Oh, we lost. Uh-oh, it's just us. Where is Cesar? Good. I was stressed out because we lost Ciso. I think he's connecting. Ciso, are you there?
I don't know what just happened. I got kicked out.
Oh gosh, I was a little stressed out. Do you have all the access that you need?
I think I do.
Good, okay.
All
Right. When shall we let people in, Keith? Are you ready to be appropriate?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. We'll wait.
All right. Okay.
Send them a little. Oh, you ready to let them in? Okay, I won't send them a message.
No, not yet.
Okay, I will
Just send them a message
them.
and say, well, yeah, you can still send them a message.
I know. Hi, folks. Thanks for joining. We'll be.
There's a couple on here, Megan and Kevin.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Any of our friends joining today, Keith?
Possibly. There was it's about 150 people registered, so.
I saw that. That's awesome.
And you can hear me okay?
I can hear you splendidly.
Excellent.
Very clear.
All right, why don't we go ahead and let him in and get started in just a minute.
Okay. Welcome, folks who are just joining. We're getting started in just a moment. Welcome.
Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi, Liz.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good. Good to see you.
You too.
All right, I think we're right at 12:30, so why don't we go ahead and kick it off?
Sounds
All right.
good.
Welcome, everyone, to today's session, ATD Central Florida Design Thinking Theory to Application. My name is Zizo Aku. I'm the incoming president for the chapter. And I'm super excited to have Keith Keating today, who will be sharing with us a thorough look into the principles of design thinking in an easy to understand format. So a little bit about our learning objectives. I think we'll be going over the value of design thinking and why more companies aren't using it. We'll also take a look at, some of the practical design thinking stories from Fortune 500 companies. We'll also look at the top 5 design thinking best practices for you to drive business results. And lastly, Keith will share with us 5 ideas for applying design thinking within our L&D departments. A little bit about our chapter. Alex Salas is our outgoing president. He's served the board since, I believe, 2019. I am the incoming president. I will be taking over the mantle of leadership from next month. We also have Rosa Espinal, who will be joining us shortly. She's the past president, and we have Christina Grant, who's our VP of Finance, Kathy Ekberry, VP of Membership, and Lisa Anzoldi, our VP of Communication. So this is our executive board. Just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce them. So next slide, please. So our focus today is pretty much to, like I mentioned earlier, go over design thinking. And we are doing this, drawing mainly from the talent development capability model that ATD has. And there are two domains that we're going to be focused on, or we're drawing from today, which is building personal capability and developing professional capability. So Keith is going to be sharing a lot of information. And again, like I said, I'm excited to be here, and we'll see, I look forward to an insightful session. And with that said, I am going to hand it over to Tiffany, who's going to be moderating this session for this afternoon. So Tiffany,
Thanks so much, Cesar.
You're welcome.
All right. So again, my name's Tiffany, and I will be your moderator today. I would like to just go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started here. So, oh, there they are. Good. Just a couple of rules of the road. We would love it if you could close out of everything except for Zoom. Don't close your Zoom window, just so you can give your full attention to this session and really engage with us. We really want this to be an interactive session, so please switch off your mobile phones and don't check your notifications. Try to focus while we're here together and we have this time. We will be taking a 5-minute break. Any questions, please drop them into chat. I will be monitoring that. Keith will be pausing at a few intervals just to regroup and assess anything that may need to be addressed. And please participate, otherwise you might be called on. It's a real thing, Keith will do it. So it's my pleasure to tell you a little bit about Keith Keating. With a career spanning over 20 years in learning and development, Keith is a workforce futurist, a design thinking practitioner, and a learning and development thought leader. He's currently pursuing his doctorate in the Chief Learning Officer program at the University of Pennsylvania. Keith partners with Fortune 500 clients, helping them tap into understanding and resolving unmet customer and employee needs. He has a keen passion for preparing talent for the future of work. And I can say that Keith is my colleague at GP. I can personally attest to his advocacy, not only for the design thinking practice, but also to his efforts to help upscale our talent for future preparedness. I just wanted to note that he really does practice what he preaches. So you're in good hands today. With that, Keith, the floor is yours.
I have to bring my own clap track. Thank you, Tiffany. I could not have written that introduction better myself. Thank you, everyone, for joining today for the next 90 minutes for our design thinking. This is a 2-part series. So this is part 1, design thinking theory, and then we have part 2 coming up in 2 weeks. So a quick overview of our agenda for today. So we'll start talking about a high-level overview of design thinking. I'll share with you design thinking in practice, especially as it relates to our industry, learning and talent and development. We'll talk about the value of design thinking. Why are we using it today? Why, and if you're not using it, why shouldn't you be using it? Why should you be using it, rather? Then we'll talk about how you can continue to build up your skills in your design thinking practitioner journey. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then we're going to go through each of the phases in more details so you can understand them in greater depth. And then we'll be sharing with you some other resources that you can leverage to continue your practitioner journey. And of course, we'll finish with another Q&A. So my goal for today is that when you leave this session, if I've done my job correctly, you will have a better understanding of design thinking, specifically as it relates to this industry and why it is a valuable tool for us to be using. So as Tiffany said, this will be an interactive session. So there will be some breakout rooms, there will be chat, there will be annotations that we're going to be using. So do please stay engaged. I want to first just get a quick sense check, and I just realized this is only the US. So that was very ethnocentric of me to assume that. And I know we've got people here who aren't in the US, so I apologize for that. For those of you that are in the US, if you could just have a practice with your annotation tool, and maybe those of you who aren't in the US, you could just pick a place that you might want to be today. So at the top of your screen is your annotation tool. So if you'll click on in the very top center of your screen and pick any one of those annotation tools, whether it be the check mark, whether it be a star or an arrow, and just let me know where you're located today. And let me figure out where I am located. So I'm actually in Toronto, which I think is somewhere over here. So I'm seeing some Michigan, some Tennessee, and a lot of Florida, obviously, since this is the Florida chapter. I spent a lot of time there. I actually live part-time in Daytona Beach or Ormond Beach near Orlando. All right, good. So we're seeing, what is that? Oh, North Carolina. Thank you, Barry. Lots of Florida, lots of Florida. Excellent. Hopefully nobody's impacted right now with the hurricanes that are coming through. So Tiffany, if you go ahead and clear that, and we will continue on. Okay, I also want to start with understanding what's your level of experience with design thinking. So if you will go into the chat and put the number 1 through 5, so not literally, of course. Number 1 is this is the first time you're hearing about design thinking, so what is it? And number 5 would be basically you're an expert and you're hoping that I can teach you something new. And this will just help give me an idea of the experience level of the participants today. I'm seeing some 4s, a half, or maybe 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 2s, 1, perfect. Nice, England. Thank you, Anita. All right, so it looks like we've got a broad range of experience levels, which is perfect. You're all in the right space. I will be sharing enough information for those of you who are significantly experienced. You will get something out of this. And for those of you who are just learning, you will definitely be getting something out of this. I want to start first with a little bit of a story. So some of you might recognize these devices. In fact, some of you may have actually had this device. I'm curious if by chance you did. So this, of course, if you're not familiar with it, is a BlackBerry. How many of you actually had a BlackBerry? So if you will click on yes or no, and that's going to be in the participants box. So if you open your participants box and click either yes or no, and just let me know if you had a BlackBerry. I'm seeing a couple of yeses, a couple of no's. Right now it's about 50-50. We've got 10 yeses, 10 no's. I'm a yes. I was one of the original users. I loved the BlackBerry. I think Oprah was the first time that I saw it. She gave her audience one, and so I immediately had to go out and get one. So here's my next question for you. We've got about 15 people that had a BlackBerry. Do you still have a BlackBerry that works today?
Look at those no's racking up.
All the no's. I did actually just see something recently that they're thinking about launching a new device, but I'm the same. I have multiple BlackBerries sitting in my desk in Florida. None of them can be used. So here's the thing. We all had one at one point. Now, none of us have a working BlackBerry. So the story is once upon a time in 2007, BlackBerry was on top of the world. They owned 50% of the world's smartphone market, multi-billion-dollar company. Within 4 years, from 2007, they would be on the verge of bankruptcy. So how does a company that's so big fall so quickly? And that question can be answered in one quote from BlackBerry executives. As they've taken time to look back at what they did wrong, BlackBerry has said, "We believed that we knew better what customers needed than they did." So BlackBerry heard their customers. They just didn't listen to them. And as a customer myself, as were many of you, the keyboard was one of the big issues. Of course, now looking back, I would love to have that old keyboard. But at the time, we all got frustrated with the keyboard. And so we made a lot of complaints of, hey, change the keyboard. We need something a little bit better. And they would say, well, you might think you want us to change it, but if we do, you're going to have to be charging your device more often through the day. So we're going to just leave it alone. Then we would complain, we want to be able to browse the internet better. There was a few little things that we could actually do, but the color was horrible. It was like that greenness. And then eventually it evolved and it just looked like a really old video game. And BlackBerry would say, well, right now we don't have the technology to do that. And the web pages wouldn't load properly. So we're going to focus on what we know how to do best. And what we know how to do is deliver your email, your contacts, your calendars. We've got some other apps. Besides, we've got millions of customers, so we obviously know what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing what we know how to do. So at the same time, a new competitor was entering the market. And it was a company that was predominantly a computer-based company evolving into the smartphone world. And that, of course, was Apple. And within 4 years, Apple would topple BlackBerry and become the new smartphone leader. What did Apple do that was so differently? So the quote from Steve Jobs that stands out the most, that really helps articulate that, is he said, "We focus on people's needs and desires rather than only the needs of the business." So Apple, compared to BlackBerry, focused on what your customers actually needed. And that is the core essence of design thinking. So what is design thinking? It's a set of principles for creative problem solving. It's a methodology that asks us to take a step back from the problem that's in front of us and think about the end user, whoever that may be, your customer, your learner, your patient, your employee, your family. Don't just focus on the problem, but step back and think about them. And that helps us lead to human-centered products, services, and internal processes. And then one of the other values is that it really helps to unlock the needs of our users, even when they're not able to articulate themselves, or even when they don't know what they are. It really helps us get to that root cause analysis of what the actual problem is that we're trying to solve. So if there's anything that you take away from today, design thinking is a focus on people. So I want you to think about that for a minute. And in the chat, what I'd like you to do is to answer this. Are there any other examples of an industry or a business that you can think of that failed by not listening to their customers? Or maybe they haven't failed yet, but they're failing you as a customer right now. So think about that. What other examples do you have of a business or an industry that has failed by not listening, by not evolving to what the customers actually needed? Tiffany, what are we seeing in the chat?
I saw a couple for Blockbuster, Keith, some Kodak, Nokia, taxis. That's a good one, Trish.
Taxis are one of my favorites. Someone else was just talking about that earlier this week, and I hadn't thought about that before, but that's a great one. You know, I use taxis all over the world, and then of course moved to Uber. I would be happy to use taxis, except they didn't want to give the customers what we needed. And what we needed was easy access to find the taxi. Blockbuster, another great example. Many people don't know that Blockbuster actually had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $1 million. And luckily, for the rest of us, they turned that opportunity down. Blockbuster made its money predominantly on the food, the snacks that they sold from the markup value, and then also from late fees. So their business model really wasn't around the actual renting of the video. And so they didn't want to evolve. They didn't want to evolve to what we needed. And what we were saying was we want to have easier access. We want to have the opportunity. Well, it started if we wanted to be able to keep our videos as long as we want to, or our DVDs, I should say. And that was Netflix's original model. And then Blockbuster tried to catch up, and by then it was just too late. Kodak is another great example that I heard. Kodak was actually the original founder of digital cameras. And this was in the late 70s when they had the first prototype. And they killed it because it wasn't part of their business model. Their business model was focusing on film. And so they didn't focus on opportunities for customers and to evolve into meeting those needs. Anything else come up, Tiffany?
Oh, yes. I am seeing some clothing brands, Gap versus Zara, also Sears, JCPenney, and Dillard's in the retail arena.
Absolutely.
I'm seeing the Disney Star Wars franchise. Interesting, very. And Anitha says Yahoo. Interesting. Another tech example.
And AOL as well. AOL had a
There's
huge opportunity years ago, and that just fizzled. So yes, these are all really great examples of not listening to your customer and not focusing on what they actually need. One of my favorite brands that does this, that has built their brand around this, is OXO. All of those cool kitchen utensils that you never thought you needed, but yet they always have one where you use it and you're like, oh my gosh, this is brilliant. Like the basic measuring cup where you can see just looking over it how much is in there rather than having to lean down and find that. So those are all really great examples. Thank you for that. So now I want to talk a little bit about the stages or phases of design thinking and what design thinking actually is, besides just to focus on people, the methodology. So there are 5 phases in design thinking: empathy, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So empathy is the foundation of design thinking. And we are starting with empathy. We're not starting with the problem. And this is what sets design thinking apart from other methodologies, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But we start with empathy, where we first learn about our audience, whomever it may be, whoever that end user, that human is. And once we go out and we understand them and their needs, we distill all of that information and data down, and then we define the problem statement based on what we've just learned. Not based on whatever our business partner told us, not based on our bias or our own beliefs of what we think it is. It's based on the actual customer or user. Then once we've defined our problem statement, then we move into the fun part, the ideation phase, where we brainstorm all the ideas we can think of, and then we narrow that scope down to creating prototypes of those ideas. And then of course we go out and we test those ideas with our users to get their feedback. So those are the 5 phases. Now, when you look at this, it looks linear, but the reality is design thinking is a non-linear iterative process, meaning that each one of these phases can be happening at different times. It doesn't have to happen in this consecutive order. For example, empathy happens throughout your entire initiative. And I would even encourage you to take empathy beyond design thinking and just be applying empathy in everything that we do, especially in our industry. Then when you get to the ideate phase, maybe you're thinking, gosh, am I even brainstorming on the right ideas? Is this even in the right realm of what may solve the user's challenge? So maybe you go back and you do more empathy research with them. Or by the time you get to the test phase, I will tell you now that some of your ideas will fail. Absolutely. That's the purpose of design thinking. Iterative, to fail fast forward quickly, dust yourself off and get back and try it over again. And it's quick and it's iterative so that we can get to the right solution that meets their needs. So it's nonlinear and it's iterative. Now, when you look at this, especially for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, you're probably thinking, well, I do some of this. Of course, we ideate, we problem solve. You know, we, of course, create a problem statement, and then, yeah, we're going to go back and test it. But here's the difference that most people don't recognize with design thinking. And that is, it is the power of all of the phases working together that make design thinking so powerful. So here's a different way to look at it. In your kitchen, you may have flour, or in my case, I have coconut flour, bananas, and eggs. Now, these are 3 perfectly fine, I don't know, kitchen ingredients all on their own. They all have a great purpose. But when you put the 3 of these together, it makes something much more powerful than the individual ingredient. And that is, you can make pancakes with just those 3 ingredients. And so as Aristotle once said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And the same is true with design thinking. It's the 5 phases working together that make it such a powerful methodology. So problem solving versus problem finding. Some of you may be thinking, well, I use Agile, I use PDCA, I use Lean Six Sigma. How is this any different? Do I have to learn something new? I don't want to learn something new. There's a difference between problem finding and problem solving. So Lean Six Sigma, I love, use it. Agile, certified, PDCA, big fan. These are all great methodologies when you are certain of the problem that you are solving. When there is no question about what you are trying to solve, that's when you use problem-solving methodologies like those. Design thinking takes a step back before that, and it focuses on the problem finding. When you're not sure what the actual problem is, or your team doesn't have alignment, that's problem finding before you just jump in and start solutioning. And all of us probably play the role of consultants at some point in our career. I am conditioned to immediately problem solve. You bring me a problem, I'm going to think back in my history and my experience, and I'm going to start giving you solutions. That's not what we want to do with design thinking. I don't want to immediately problem solve with you. I want to step back and problem find to make sure that we're focusing on the right problem. So problem finding versus problem solving. That's the difference between them. So I want to say this all a little bit in a different way. Again, I love Lean Six Sigma, Agile, PDCA. I break it down to this level to show you, if you prefer Lean Six Sigma or PDCA and you don't want to change, don't. If you're with your clients and they don't want to change, that's fine as well. Don't force anybody to try and change with this new methodology. I am not saying that design thinking should replace everything. What I'm advocating for, if you don't necessarily want to change whatever methodology you're using, I'm advocating for one single gap that exists in all of these other methodologies. And that is they start with empathy. Agile, PDCA, and Lean Six Sigma all start with defining or planning how to solve that problem. They're not taking a step back to figure out, are we even solving the right problem? What do our customers, learners, patients, employees actually need? And that's where the empathy comes into play here. So again, not advocating for one over the other. If you prefer those, that's fine. Just add empathy throughout the entire initiative and start it with empathy so that you are connecting with your end user. Now, for those of you who are a little more advanced and maybe you're familiar already with Lean Six Sigma and Agile, I want to show you one other way, because a lot of people will ask, well, how is it really different? And isn't design thinking really partially agile? It absolutely is. It's iterative and it's agile. This is a quick model of what the three methodologies look like together. And so this was designed by Gartner. And so I'm leveraging it from them. And I love this, basically saying the first section with design thinking is where you identify what your customer problem is. That's your problem finding. Once you've gone through the ideation phase and you're ready to start prototyping, that's when you could then loop into the Lean Six Sigma methodology. And then once you have your prototype ready and you're actually going to execute it and get it out there, make it business as usual, that's when you could move into the agile methodology. So all three complement each other and they work together. So we're not contradicting each other, they are complementing each other.
Keith, we had a question. It seems like a good point to bring it up. Alicia asked, how does this compare with root cause or training needs analysis?
How does design thinking compare to root cause or training needs analysis? That's a really great question. I would say it is another tool in your toolbox in terms of empathy research. So your root cause, your needs analysis, I have worked in a number of organizations where that's a bit more tactical. You know, sometimes they'll have a check sheet that they're going through and, okay, I need to ask these questions. I don't really consider that empathy research. For me, it's more important to start with empathy research. So training needs analysis, your intake, just making a bit more of a conscious effort to having the empathy research approach rather than just a standard intake form approach, because that's not going to elicit that deeper level of understanding of your learners. But I would say the TNA, training needs analysis, is a tool that you could use within there. But for me, empathy research is more important, but also depends on the situation that you're in. But good question. Very similar. Design thinking is a tool in our toolkit. So just like when you're building a house, you're not going to use one tool. So for me, design thinking is my hammer. And I use the hammer when it's necessary to use the hammer, obviously. There are other tools I would use. So I would use a TNA in some situations. I would use design thinking in other problem finding situations. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but good question. Thanks. So another question I often get asked is design thinking just a trend? You know, there's a lot of flavors of the month, methodologies. Is this new? The answer is it is not new, and it's not just a trend. So let me explain a little bit why. Design thinking has been around since the 1950s. And it originally, of course, came from designers, but it was primarily used in the architectural and engineering framework. Then in the 1960s, we have Horst Riddle, who was a design theorist, and he's the one that coined the term wicked problem. So if you've ever heard of wicked problem in design thinking, a lot of times people say design thinking is used to solve wicked problems. And so that came from Riddle in the 1960s. And that's, he was really focusing on making the field of design more scientific, the approach to it. It really started to kick off in the early 90s with IDEO. So IDEO is a product design organization based out of San Francisco. And they're the ones that are attributed to making lots of cool design products. So I talked about OXO in the kitchen. That came from IDEO. Basically, IDEO looks at either new product development or product rebranding, or if a product is failing and they want to shape up the image, IDEO focuses on that. So they're very product driven. And that's historically where design thinking came from, was focusing on product. we're not going to be talking about the product aspect today. We're going to be talking about using it in terms of services within learning and development. And so design thinking, then in 97, 98, Apple attributed their new design to design thinking. So that really kicked it up another notch. And then in the early 2000s, Stanford created the D School, which is the design school based off of the design thinking methodology. So that's a little bit of a historical timeline of how we got to where we are now. So again, historically, it was all about product. I focus on not the product, but the services space, which is our space. So design thinking can be used for products, again, internal processes, services, and continuous improvement. I love the use case for continuous improvement, and we'll talk much more about that in the use case in part 2 in 2 weeks. So quick knowledge check. You're going to use your annotation tool. So again, at the top of your screen, click on the annotation tool, select whichever one you'd like. True or false? Define is the first phase of design thinking. Define is the first phase of design thinking. So I'm seeing some falses here. Anybody think it's true?
I'm seeing a couple of falses in chat.
Good. All right, that is correct. Define is not the first phase of design thinking. That would be empathy. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the workforce of the future. So the World Economic Forum has identified a number of skills that they're calling the skills of the future. These are our higher order cognitive skills. These are the skills that make us human. Empathy, creativity, problem solving, fluency of ideas, emotional intelligence, originality. Within these skill sets, design thinking encompasses empathy, creativity, and problem solving. And so when we think about, is this a trend? Is design thinking going to continue to be used? In my opinion, it will absolutely continue to be an important skill set for all of us to master, because focusing on humans is going to be imperative for today, but also in the future of work. And that's the foundation of this entire methodology, is focusing on humans with empathy, creativity, and problem solving. So it will not be going anywhere. And I'm glad that you are taking the time today to learn about design thinking. So how do I know when to apply design thinking? So these are some questions that you could ask yourself when you're thinking, is this the right time to be using it? The first is, if the problem is human-centered, it's about humans, then design thinking is probably a good use case. If you don't clearly understand the problem, or you don't have alignment in your team, design thinking could be a good tool for you. If the problem is fairly complex, it's ambiguous, it's a wicked problem, and you don't know what the answer is. If you already know what the answer is, design thinking may not be the right tool for you, because you already know how to execute. Then you use one of the problem-solving methodologies. But if you're not sure what it is, and the problem is fairly complex, design thinking could be a good use case. And the last one, hit that too fast. You may need a fresh idea or a fresh approach to solving problems. Design thinking could be a good use case, where you could just use the tools from the ideation phase. Another question that I get asked is, I hear this phrase mystery or puzzle. Which one of these is more applicable to design thinking? So let's think about a puzzle. You get a puzzle, hopefully it has all of the pieces. On the top of the box, it's got the picture of what you're trying to create. So you open the box, you dump out the puzzles, you know what you need to do. You need to probably find the corners, or at least that's my trick. And then once you've got the corners, then you do the edges, and then you kind of work your way in by the pictures. I already know how to solve the problem. There's no question there that, again, if all the pieces are there, there's a methodology, there's a method to my madness, or approach to use to solve that puzzle. However, a mystery is different. If you look at the box, I don't actually know what I'm supposed to do here. I can see on the front that I need to know some sort of code to open this, but there could be a secret compartment somewhere. It's like those rooms, the escape rooms. You know, sometimes when you walk in, you have no idea what you need to do first. That's a mystery. So you've got to figure it out. Design thinking is a great use case for those type of escape rooms. So the answer is design thinking is more applicable for mysteries than it is puzzles. When you're not sure what you need to be doing and you need help to identify that, to create the scope of it, that's a potential great use case for design thinking. So it's good for mysteries, not for puzzles. So who can use design thinking? It's a bit of a trick question. Anyone, everyone, any industry, any line of business. It's non-denominational. It's available for all of us to be using. So here's some examples of different Fortune 500 companies that use design thinking. So Pepsi, their culture is rooted in design thinking. A lot of their products come out of empathy research. IBM is evolving to a design thinking culture. I'll talk about Bank of America in a minute. Uber, if you've ever used Uber Eats was founded based off of a design thinking research in terms of conducting that empathy research to find out what do our customers need. The customer said, well, you already give me a vehicle. Great. How about you bring you food with the vehicle for me? Airbnb. In fact, let me talk a little bit about Airbnb. So Airbnb's founders attribute their success to design thinking. They were two MIT and Stanford students, and they had been focusing on the code of design thinking, or excuse me, the code of Airbnb. They weren't focused on what customers actually needed. And so when the prototype launched in New York City, they were getting dismal results. And so they went out and they conducted empathy research to figure out why, what's going on, what do you actually need? And what they uncovered was the photos that people were putting up were horrible. And so if the photos aren't attractive and don't clearly represent the place, no one's going to rent them. So they went out, got cameras themselves, and started taking the first rounds of photos. And that's when the site started to take off. So they never lost sight of that purpose of experiences, that purpose of focusing on the customer, the human, and they've brought that into their organization. And they've recently changed their chief HR officer to a chief employee experience officer. Additionally, if you've been on Airbnb in the past few years, maybe the last 5 years or so, there's a new experience option in there where when you're traveling to a place, you can meet someone local, you can have a cooking class, you can learn how to dance, or you can learn how to surf. That also came out of design thinking, thinking about what it is that customers actually need and want. Another example is LinkedIn. Right now, there's an issue in LinkedIn, in Silicon Valley with low employee engagement scores. It's ambiguous, it's complex, it's human-centered, and it's a mystery. People don't know why. So LinkedIn is using design thinking to work with a lot of the big Silicon Valley companies to figure out what's going on. Why do we have such low employee engagement scores? And then a last example is a telecom company in Australia, Telstra. So Telstra used design thinking to reimagine their onboarding experience. So their onboarding for new hires was taking, I think, about 8 weeks, which is 2 months. That's significantly way too long from the time that you hire somebody to the time that they are productive in their job. And so they were getting a lot of bad feedback in terms of their onboarding experience. So they didn't necessarily know why. So they used design thinking to reimagine that onboarding experience, and they shortened that time to proficiency from 8 weeks to 4 weeks, which is a significant cost savings for the organization.
I see an opportunity here just to do a little bit more background. Wendy's asked, she says that it sounds as if inventing a new service or product, for that case, design thinking is great, good use case there. She's having difficulty seeing how this might work for people who have a service-oriented job, like those of us in L&D or, for example, finance. She would love to hear an example with that, and I know we have a few right inside the work that we do.
We do. So I'm going to say hold off on that because we're going to get to L&D in about 10 or 15 minutes or so. So we're just building up. Stay with me.
Okay.
Bank of America. For those of you who are customers at Bank of America, they wanted to figure out what more can we do for our customers. And so they started a design thinking initiative. And what customers were saying was, we want help finding ways to save more money. And so through design thinking, they came up with the program, Keep the Change, and it rounds everybody's debit card up to the nearest dollar, takes that money, puts it into a bank account for them. And so it's been such a great program that over 12 million customers have enrolled, over $2 billion have been saved through this program. An example that I did about 2 years ago with Mercedes was around the L&D space. And this one was, how might we reduce the formal classroom training time? So this is from the time before when we were heavily in person, especially from a training development perspective. And so in this case, it was a sales C-suite program, and the sales consultants were spending about 27 hours a week in training program, which is significantly too much. It was cost heavy because of hotel nights, days away from work, and of course, training resources. And so through design thinking, we did a lot of empathy research, ideation. What we came up with was, let's create a multimodality solution that has more of a digitalized approach. So we have the pre-work that can be done digitally to help prepare them for when they get into the classroom, so that we're focusing on actually what they need with that hands-on experience. And then a post component, again, digitally, where we can work on the sustainment options to help that learning sustainment continue after that session. So as a result, we were able to reduce the classroom time by 38%, and then saving over 700 hotel days and 700 days away from their job. I'll talk more about some other examples in a few minutes. So, quick knowledge check. True or false? Design thinking, Lean Six Sigma, and Agile complement each other. True or false? Seeing some true here. Lots of trues. The answer is that is true. They complement each other, absolutely. So let's talk about the value of design thinking. It puts people first. That's one of the best and greatest values of design thinking, is it helps us keep our humans, in our case, learners, keep the learners at the forefront of everything that we're doing. Anyone can adopt it once you understand it, like you're doing today. Once you go out and practice it, anyone can adopt it. It helps to drive innovation and creative problem solving. It helps us reframe business problems, which brings me to probably my favorite value of it. It transforms us from being order takers to trusted advisors. And this, when I learned about design thinking about 4 years ago, I had an aha moment when I realized that I have not been putting the learners first. My business partner or my customers or my manager will bring me an order, like create a web-based training, put together a 2-day ILT, create a quick guide, and I immediately jump into solution mode. I hadn't thought about the fact that, do we know this is the actual problem that we're trying to solve? Do we know what behaviors we're trying to change? Where did this problem originate from? Was this just an HR order that someone created in a silo and worked its way down? Is this just an idea that an executive had come up with and told us to execute? Or is this actually a need of our learners? And so I'm not afraid to say that I had not ever thought about it in that manner. And when I went through the first design thinking session, it was like, wow, you've been in this industry for a long time and you have not been putting the learners first. And so for me, design thinking is what I call my shield, or almost a weapon or a tool, because once I understood it, it gave me the vocabulary and it gave me the framework so that when those orders come in, I can have a consultative conversation similar to a training needs analysis, performance consulting discussion, and I can use a framework that exists, that's known within the industry, to help coach my business partner, my manager, my director, to taking a step back and figuring out, are we thinking about the learners? Are we putting the learners first? So it helps to transform us from being order takers to trusted advisors. Think about it a different way. We often get our orders and the customer will come and they'll give us the order. So in this case, the order is, I want you to build a swing in a tree. So the customer has their idea of what they actually want. Now, it depends on the needs analysis or the intake process of how that message comes in. But the person that got that message understood it literally. So in this case, I need to put a swing in a tree. And so that's how they've crafted out the project. Then they bring in an ISD and they tell the ISD, we need you to create a swing in a tree. So the ISD just does just that. They design a program that delivers exactly what they were asked to do. Then we've got performance consultants or business consultants that say, oh yes, this is a really great idea. We're going to have a nice, comfortable swing in a tree. It's going to be the best swing you've ever had. It's going to solve all of your problems. What the customer actually needed was something that was global, that was scalable, that was cost effective, maybe that was designed a little bit differently than what they had originally thought of because they didn't know that another solution existed. And then what they got in the end was an amalgamation of all of our different ideas based on the project manager, based on the ISD, based on the performance consultant. And 6 months later, the customer says, this is not what I wanted. This didn't solve my problem. It's the trainers, it's training's fault. We hear that all the time. It's training's fault. A lot of times it's not training's fault. It's that we didn't understand the full picture. We didn't have access to the learners. We didn't understand what behavior we were trying to change. So if design thinking is so great, then why aren't we using it more? That's a great question, Tiffany. Thank you for asking. The first reason is it's risky, it's disruptive to processes, and there are many unknowns. So this to me is not a bad thing, but this is why a lot of organizations shy away from it because it is disruptive. Imagine if your learning organization believes that this is exactly what your learners want and you're going down the path and you've got your LMS and you're putting everything up there and you've got your hour-long courses, but then you go out and you do empathy research and your learners say, well, we don't want an LMS. That's not, the training is not in my moment of need. I need it in my flow of work. I need it more mobile friendly. I need to have this, this, and this. Why would that be a bad thing to uncover that and to help our learners and to help performance support and performance improvement by putting learning where they need it? But a lot of learning organizations are scared of hearing that. And so rather than going out and hearing what the learners actually want and need, we continue down our path of doing what we've always known how to do best. So why aren't we using it? It's risky, disruptive, and there are many unknowns. When I'm doing design thinking initiatives, a lot of times the first question, what's my return on investment? Or what am I going to get at the end of this? Well, I don't know. We haven't gone out and talked to the learners yet. We haven't gone out to collect all that data to understand what their challenges are to solve those challenges. So I can't tell you on day one what it's going to be. We need a little time to go out and conduct that research. Well, if you can't tell me today what it is, then we're not going to do this. So it's risky, disruptive to processes, and many unknowns. It stops at theory. People will say, well, I attended your webinar. It has 5 phases. I get it. It's not that complicated. It's not complicated, but it does take experience. It does take practice to understand how to use the tools, to understand how to have consultative conversations with your business partners, to get them on board with even using this. It takes practice to understand how to conduct empathy research. Empathy research is an absolute skill. And then it takes practice to figure out, well, I've got all this data. How do I distill it down into a problem statement in an unbiased manner? That takes practice. Oftentimes there's a lack of support. If managers and or leadership is not supportive or engaged, we will fail. Just like with most initiatives. Excuse me, design thinking is no different in this case. And so we have to get leadership buy-in and support for this to be successful. Imagine if you didn't have any manager support and you start conducting research, empathy research with employees, and a manager catches sight of that. Why are you talking to my employees? What are you talking to them about? What do you want to know? Why didn't I know this? So we need to have the support of management, of leadership. Some people think of it as a one-time event versus a culture change. For me, design thinking is a mind shift. It is not a one-time event. It is a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking about our learners in everything that we do. So it's not, we're just going to go out once and apply design thinking. It is a approach that we should be using consistently to make sure that we're staying connected with our learners so that we are solving for their needs, not our own. And lastly, the name is a bit of a misnomer and one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like design thinking. If we break down the name, so we've got, sorry, little alarm there. I guess that's time for me to wake up. We have the name. So the first word is design. That would insinuate that you need to be a designer. You need to be creative. Not the case. Design thinking provides all the tools for us to help allow for that creativity through the use of the tools. Then the word think means, some people insinuate that to be, well, that's theoretical. It's high level. I don't want some 10,000-foot strategic view. I want something that's hands-on and going to give me some tactical outcomes. That's design thinking. It's hands-on from empathy research all the way through to the testing phase. So the name, again, is a bit of a misnomer. I'd thought about working with a group of people through design thinking initiatives to maybe rebrand it, but then it felt like we might be creating another layer of confusion since it already exists. So we'll all continue on using design thinking name. We just have to educate and make people aware of the value of it and not to get caught up on design being a designer or thinking being theoretical, because neither of those are true. All right. So now we are going to take a few minutes and we're going to go into breakout rooms. So it's been about 25, 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. We have talked about a high-level overview of what design thinking is. I've given you some examples of the value, some of the examples of the challenges. We talked how it's being used just in the industry in general. We'll talk more about the L&D space a little bit later, but I specifically want to send you into breakout rooms to talk about this first before I bring you the examples of how this can be used in learning and development. I want you to take a few minutes and think about where design thinking might be valuable for you. It doesn't have to be just in your job. It could be, at another organization, or it could be product driven or whatnot, but based on everything that you've learned right now, come up with one example where you think design thinking could be valuable, a good use case for it. So here's a quick overview. 7 minutes in the breakout room. When you get in there, unmute yourself, introduce yourself. It's going to be 4 people for a breakout room, so it won't be too many people. Introduce yourself. What I'd like you to do is share your individual response. So everybody's going to go around and share their one idea. Then what I'd like you to do is agree on what you think, which idea might have the biggest impact, or just the idea that collectively you want to come back and share with the broader group. Then you're going to pick a spokesperson. At the end of 7 minutes, we're going to call you back in, and then I'm going to ask each spokesperson to share what that idea was that the team agreed upon. So quick recap, 7 minutes, unmute yourself. When you get in there, introduce yourself individually. Each person share one idea, agree on a single idea as a group, pick a spokesperson, we'll bring you back. You're going to share that single idea with the rest of us so that we can come up with other ideas and use cases for design thinking. So with that, we're going to send you into breakout rooms. Tiffany, are you all set?
I am sending them now. All right, folks. See you on the other side. I'm seeing people heading out. Good.
Slowly.
Slowly but surely.
Slowly.
We have some annotation here, I see. Let me erase that.
I guess we can't force the other people, can we?
Let me see. No. No. Folks who are still in the room, if you see a little pop-up asking you to join the breakout room, if you could just click and go ahead and join your team. We have about 5 minutes left, so you can still get plenty done.
How was the chat?
Chat's going really well, a lot of engagement. I have a couple questions. I will tell you what they are now so we can think about when you might want to work them in. I have a question around how this works with ADDIE, how design thinking works with ADDIE. I already made the suggestion it's a good preliminary to the A phase, the analysis phase. I also had a question someone wanted to ask on the Mercedes example. How is it different from a flipped classroom in that case? And the same person wanted to know how can we work through cultural barriers for the kinds of conversations that design thinking might, I think he was saying that it was about order taking. He was asking how to break that culture of order taking from a client that may be part of cultural expectations for how clients are served in some team cultures and in some national cultures.
That's probably the only, so if you'll save that one for the end.
Okay.
I don't think I'm gonna have time to get to the other one, so.
Okay.
This only goes till 2 o'clock, right?
Yeah.
Crap.
There's a lot. There's a lot of material to cover.
I'm gonna have to kill the break.
Oh. Oh.
There's no way I'll have time. Yikes.
Okay, 2 minutes left on the breakout room.
Okay. I'm gonna hold that Q&A too.
Okay. Okay, 1 minute.
Now, is it 1 minute until the 7 minutes are up, or is it 1 minute until we go into 60 seconds?
We have 48 seconds until everyone comes back.
Okay. Because sometimes, whatever, I don't want to get into it.
Semantics.
It is.
Okay, 19 seconds till the breakout rooms close.
So I'm going to ask them to raise their hand.
Sure.
And the little icon. And then if you could just call on, maybe if you'll just call on 4.
Sure. Okay. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, the countdown was just for closing the breakout rooms, and now they're saying they'll close in 42 seconds.
Yeah, it gets
I didn't know it counted
confusing.
that way. It is confusing.
but some people are coming. Yeah, so I don't.
Some people can come back as soon as you get the little notice saying you're almost done. Okay. Make sure everything's clear. I see a few folks coming back. Welcome back. Breakout rooms closing in 12. Welcome back, folks who are rejoining. Okay. We should have everyone, Keith.
Sounds good. So welcome back. Hopefully the technology worked in our favor today, although a couple people weren't able to get in. So what I would like to ask now is, for those of you who were the spokesperson, if you could click on the raise hand so that we know who you are, and then Tiffany will go through. And so what I would like is if you could just share what the one example was that your team wanted to bring forward about a use case where design thinking could be valuable. Tiffany, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Okay, I see that Barry is a group leader. Barry.
Hello.
Share. Hi there.
Okay, cool. So you can hear me.
Yes.
All right. So we agreed that at my organization, we are in the process of rethinking our training organization. In the past, it had been lots of individual teams training clients externally to us. We're a financial technology company, so we would teach banks and financial institutions, and we would help, and each of our product lines had their own training team. So now we've all come together and we've learned that there is a gap, and that gap is on the internal side. There's a global learning team that handles all like the HR training, but they basically send you off to your team, your division, in your desk and say, have a nice time and do your job. And there's nothing between that and the client training. So now we need to fill this gap. We've created a team that I'm part of called Employee Engagement, and we're trying to turn some of that inward. But what I'm doing is I'm looking at organizations like the ATD, Training Magazine, LPI, some of these kind of things, and saying, how can we look at what they're doing and kind of shift ourselves from being an LMS with a bunch of content in it to like an information media publishing type of organization that does training. So training is part of that.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the ATD, right, they have certification programs, they have webinars, we do things like this. There's all of it. So it's just rethinking some of the offerings and how we talk about training as a whole, and get training its seats in the company to do things, you know,
Mm-hmm.
about product development and stuff, so we can get to stuff faster and solve problems faster.
So you absolutely can use design thinking for that. I think you would want
I
to
maybe past it a little bit because we've kind of already figured out that this is where the problem is.
Yeah.
Use design thinking to get to the problem, possibly.
Yeah. So someone was sharing the chat earlier about, you know, flipped classrooms. And so
That was me.
Oh, cool, good. So the first thing is, and I don't think I've shared this yet, or we'll talk about it later, but design thinking is not a tool for every single problem. So if you and I were having a conversation like we are right now, and you were saying this is kind of the situation, I would probably say, not the best use case for design thinking for the exact reason which you've already identified. You already know there's a gap. Now, if you wanted to figure out what the best modality is or how you could reimagine learning in general, then design thinking could be a good use case for that. But as of now, what I hear you saying is you're already aware of the work streams, and you've identified there's this gap here before you get to global. So you're working on closing that gap. No, you don't necessarily need design thinking for that. But if you wanted to understand more about what your learners want, what they need, what their challenges are, design thinking could be a great use case for that.
Well, and I think that might be our next step, actually, because now we have to figure out how do we fill the gap.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, yeah.
Good. Thank you for that. Tiffany.
Sure.
Yes, Carlene had her hand up. Carlene, what did you have?
Hi. In our group, we had a discussion on using it for needs analysis. I think that was a general consensus, but the specific example we had was for goal setting. I worked in the higher education space, and the team that I led was a group of individuals for our MBA and doctoral programs. And I used it as a way to collect information from our various stakeholders, students, faculty, to figure out what our goals would be so that we could develop tactical activities to address those goals.
Great use case. Goal setting, absolutely. There's a lot of times I'll work with HR organizations and they will come to us and they'll say, we want to be a better HR partner. It's ambiguous, it's human-centered. We don't necessarily know what that means or what the needs are of the organization. So it's a great use case for design thinking, because one of the best ways to be a business partner is to understand what your customers, in this case, the employees, actually want and actually need. So that's where the empathy research comes in. And so a lot of times organizations, there's a disconnect between HR and the goals that they set and the actual needs of the learners. And so I'm often trying to coach HR to say, listen, we understand there are strategical goals that the organization may set, but we need to make sure they're connected to what the employees actually need. If you're going out and you're setting these strategic goals that have nothing to do with helping the learners drive performance improvement, drive behavior changes, you're not going to involve the organization. You are driving your own goals and your own ideals. And so that's a really great use case, setting your needs and your objectives for the year. Tiffany,
Yes.
we have time for two more.
Great. Krishna also has a hand up. Krishna, what would you share?
Yes, hi. Thank you for letting me share. So yeah, so currently, I currently do remote training because of the environment that we find ourselves in today. A lot of companies had to switch to a lot of remote virtual training rather than face-to-face. But a couple of the companies I work, and I do a lot of gig work. I really don't work for one particular company. I just contract myself out. So that's why I'm going to say the way I'm going to say it. But one of the companies I worked for last year seemed to have adapted well with remote training. But what I noticed when I started with a company that you know, just as the COVID hit, and they quickly had to send their employees home and switch over from face-to-face to remote training. One of the things I'm discovering, I can continue to discover, is that they are using the same material that was used in a face-to-face environment and just stick it on a remote training tool and hoping that the learners will pick up on it, but it's not going to work. So one of the things I'm thinking, they have to really go back to the drawing board and redesign the entire training program to fit a remote learning environment rather than a face-to-face environment. And as we were discussing in our group, that could probably also involve a budgetary situation, whether they have the money or, you know, the funds to pay someone to come in and restructure. But I think one of the key things is that design thinking can help them restructure it, because in the end, I'm not getting the impression that they have the learner in mind. They probably just, oh, we got to get through this training. Hey, use this material, get it done, or however what. But are the learners learning anything? So that's the example I wanted to share.
It's spot on. We cannot lift and shift ILT to VILT. It does not work. And if that's being done, to your point, they're not thinking of the learners. And so design thinking, redesigning that through design thinking would be a great use case, because it starts with understanding the learners, understanding the way they learn, and keeping that empathetic viewpoint of them as we're developing the program. So we know it has to be engaging. We know we need breaks, which, by the way, I just realized the time. And so I apologize, but I have to skip the break because I want to get as much in as I can. So maybe we'll be able to finish a few minutes earlier, but so that's not very empathetic. Well, it is, because I'm trying to get as much information to you as I can. So that is a really great use case of design thinking, though. Absolutely. And Tiffany, I'm going to say, let's stop there because I want to keep moving so that we can get through our content. So now I want to talk about thank you, Tiffany, 5 use cases for design thinking within L&D. So the first is improving the learner experience. So I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how might we and what that means and why we use it in the context of design thinking. But improving the learner experience is something we should always be thinking about. And it's ambiguous, it can be complex, it's human-centered, it's about our learners, and we don't necessarily know what the solution is because we haven't gone out to understand from them what we need to evolve or if we need to evolve. But we should always be thinking about how can we make the learner experience even better, continuous improvement. And so for us in our industry, that's the biggest use case that I love is how can we improve the learner experience? How can we be an even better talent and development partner? And in fact, that's the whole session on part 2 is the design thinking use case at General Motors, where we focused on improving the learner experience. And so we'll walk through that step by step. From an HR perspective, how might we attract and retain new talent? So maybe if we're having a low rate of people applying for jobs, or maybe we're finding that we're not finding the right talent. Well, we need to figure out how do we attract and retain the talent that's necessary to do the work. That's a great use case of design thinking. From an HR perspective, again, how might we redesign the employee reward system in a way that's meaningful for employees? I've worked for a lot of organizations and I've seen this happen where HR will launch a new employee, employee reward, like, and pardon me if you love golf, but let's say, suddenly we've given everybody 50% off on their next golf game. Well, there's a lot of bias and assumptions in there that people play golf, that they physically can play golf, that they like to play golf, that they live in a place where you can play golf. So HR should be thinking about the employees, especially in the employee reward system. How might we improve the employee experience and engagement? This is something that we all probably think about at our organizations. And it's either, you love the employee experience or there are ways to improve the employee experience. And so design thinking is a great tool for that, just like I talked about with LinkedIn and Silicon Valley. And the last one, how might we create a culture that empowers creativity, collaboration, and innovation? I see a lot of companies say we're innovative or we want our employees to be innovative or innovation is part of our culture. But if I asked each of you what innovation means to you, you're going to give me a different definition. So has the organization done their due diligence to understand what innovation means to the employees versus separating the organization from the employees? And so by using design thinking, we can help uncover how to create a culture change, a culture shift for whatever it may be. In this case, it could be creativity, collaboration, innovation. Anytime you're trying to create a culture shift or culture change, design thinking is a great tool for that. So 5 use cases in design thinking. I want to share with you real quick in terms of some terminology. You might have heard of human-centered design. So maybe you're thinking, well, this sounds like it's human-centered design. Is it? The answer is yes, it is. Thank you again, Tiffany, for asking that question. Human-centered design is designing for humans, with humans in mind. And so think of human-centered design as the umbrella. And within that umbrella, you have a family of different methodologies that you can choose from, depending on your need. And there are 6 of those. For me and for us, we tend to focus on just the learner space. So I've broken it down to 3 areas that tend to fall into learner-centric design. And that's design thinking, learner experience, and user experience can also fall into learner-centric design, especially when we're using technology to deliver learning services. So that's a little bit of vocabulary there, just in case you weren't aware of those different use cases. So quick knowledge check, again, using your annotation tools. Design thinking is better suited when trying to solve a mystery or a puzzle. A mystery or a puzzle. See, mostly mysteries.
The
No
mysteries
puzzles.
in chat.
Perfect. All right, that is correct. It is a mystery. Okay, in the chat, if you can answer this question for me, finish this phrase for me. Design thinking can help us evolve from being order takers to...
I see trusted advisors.
2 words.
Oh, I'm seeing a lot of trusted advisors. I'm seeing a partners.
Partner works. Trusted advisor works. Better business partner works. Absolutely. Okay.
Consultant is one.
Consultant works. So now we're going to switch to talking about the phases. I'm going to go through in a deeper level of what happens at each phase of design thinking. And the first phase, of course, is empathy, where we're learning about the audience. I want to ask you, though, in the chat, answer what do you see on this next slide? So in the chat, I see Tiffany looking really closely. What do you see on the screen here? Go ahead and put that in the chat. And Tiffany, if you'll give me some of those answers.
Sure thing. Somebody said a person under a tree. I'm seeing a few faces. Somebody said two things, a face and a woman, a face, a lady in a tree, face and a woman walking, elderly woman walking, a boat and a lion, someone in a robe, lion, witch, and wardrobe, feather in the tree.
Interesting.
Man's face and a lady.
Here is a rhetorical question to ask yourself. Who's right?
Oh, Christine has anticipated this question and she said many things depend on how you look at them.
Absolutely. Everyone is right in this situation because what you see is your perception. This is your reality. And that's the same for our learners. What they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what they're going through, that is their reality. And that's what we have to remain engaged with and understand. And that's what empathy is. It's the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing. And so through design thinking, it helps us uncover the voice of our customer, in this case, our learner, and it helps remove our own bias. If you have a brain, you have bias, whether you want to admit it or not. So the best way to combat bias is by acknowledging it and being aware of the ways that bias exists. So confirmation bias and false consensus effect are two of the most common forms of bias that we have. And so confirmation bias is looking for the validations of the beliefs that you already hold. So that's like, if you love the LMS and you think the LMS is the greatest thing, and then you go out and you start asking questions like, hey, you love the LMS, right? Or tell me what you like about the LMS. Both of those are leading questions, and it's confirmation bias filled questions because you're making the assumption that they even use it and of course that they like it. And then you have false consensus effect. And that's believing that what you believe, everybody else believes, or filling in the holes in conversations. So we tend to be uncomfortable when we have gaps in conversations. And so we try to fill those in with our own assumptions and our own beliefs. Get rid of all that. When you're doing empathy research, well, not just empathy research, we should just be practicing that in general, but in the scope of empathy research, we need to make sure that we are combating against that. And so within empathy research, we conduct empathy three separate ways. Trying by actually doing it yourself, and this is pretty common in product design. So you get a new toy, you play with it, you figure it out, a new app on your phone, you figure it out. So you're trying it yourself as if you were a customer or a user. The next is looking, observing, having that 10,000-foot view where you're just watching how everything is interacting, like customers in a grocery store or people in an office space, just seeing how they operate, how they work together or don't work together. And then we have engagement, and that's talking directly with the learners or users. And the great thing about that is there tends to be a difference in what you see people doing and what people say that they do. And that's why it's important to be focusing on both observing and also engaging, even from our learners' perspective. There's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And so these are three ways that we can conduct empathy research. The purpose and the reason that empathy research is so important, and I want to give you an example of this in practice. And just as a spoiler alert, Henry Ford did not say this, although a lot of people attribute this to him. He never actually said this, but it's a beautiful quote nonetheless. If I'd asked customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And what that means in our context is our customers don't often always know what they want. It's like, one of my biggest pet peeves in the surveys that we give in training and development. Is there anything else that you want? Well, they don't necessarily know. And that's the same thing with the horses. If Henry Ford had gone out and asked his customers, what do you want? They would have said faster horses. And so if he executed on somehow engineering faster horses, he would have completely lost out on the other idea that helped solve the business problem of the users that they didn't even know that they needed. And so we can't just ask our customers, our learners, what they want. We have to conduct empathy research to help understand the big picture, to help figure out what it is that we're trying to solve for them. So some guiding principles for empathy. First of all, assume a beginner's mindset. You're a blank sheet of paper. You're there not to judge them. You're there to question everything, even when you think you understand. You think you get what they're saying, question more. Drill down deeper. Be truly curious of what they're talking about. Find patterns in what they're saying to you and listen. Your job is to listen. It's 80% listening and 20% asking questions, not talking, not giving feedback, not giving your perspective, and not even trying to explain. If they're telling you about the project that you had or the learning product you developed, and they're telling you all the ways that it was awful, you're not there to tell them they're wrong or to correct them. You're just there to listen and capture all of that data. I want to share with you some best practices during the empathy interview. And the empathy research is the most important phase, and also the how do I say this? The phase that takes the most amount of preparation, because it's not just going out and asking questions. It takes work. And again, I'll talk more about that in phase 2. Take copious amounts of notes of your experience before you walk in, when you're there. In fact, if you can, have someone else be a note taker for you, or record the sessions with the participants' permission, of course. You're there to understand, not to validate your beliefs or your ideas. It's fine at the end if maybe what your team had talked about or what you thought gets validated, but you're not going in with the distinct purpose of validating. You're just going in with understanding. Encourage stories and follow their tangents. Avoid yes or no questions that's going to give you a single word answer, yes or no. Use a decision tree if you need to use yes or no questions. Pay attention to nonverbal cues. If you're having an empathy research with someone and they don't want to talk to you, don't talk to them. Don't force them. You're not going to get good data out of it. So it's important to pay attention to nonverbal cues. So if you can't be in person with them, make sure you have your camera on so you can see each other. Don't be afraid of silence. I find that Westerners tend to get uncomfortable with silence. Don't fill it. Give them time to think about the question you've asked them to come up with the answer. If they don't know or they don't understand the question, they'll tell you. Ask questions neutrally and don't suggest answers. And then, of course, use unpacking questions. The first response that they give you is never the full picture. Use unpacking questions like, why do you say that? Tell me more about that. What were you thinking when you did that? How did you feel about this? What did you think about that? That's going to drill down to a greater depth of content, of data for you to truly understand them. I'm going to skip this question for now, just in the essence of time. I wanted to ask if you have any best practices, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll see them a little bit later after the session, but I'm going to continue on. So those are high-level overview best practices for the empathy phase. The next phase, of course, is the define, where we take all of that research and we define a problem statement, where you're clarifying your point of view based on the learner. And there tends to be a number of tools that we use, but I'm going to talk about 4 of them briefly. The first is the 4 box. This we tend to complete after we've had that empathy interview, and we write down what you said, did, thought, and felt. So it helps us create what's going to be the start of our user or learner personas. Then we have the how might we questions. And this is reframing the problem statement so that it's more actionable and meaningful. And I'm going to give you more examples of those, and we're going to practice them in part 2. Then we have our personas. I love personas. If you're not using them, highly, highly recommend them. Personas are an amalgamation of the data based on a specific role or gender or whatever type of data point that you want to focus on. So this is an example of a learner persona that we created based off of the role of a customer service representative. And so this is completed after we finish all of our research, and we're creating a generalized picture of what our learner looks like, what they represent, so that we can have a clear picture in our mind of who we're trying to solve for. And so I mentioned how might we questions briefly. We take problem statements and we turn them into how might we questions because it makes it much more meaningful and actionable. If I said to you, learners don't like our training, that's a problem statement. If I rephrase it like, how might we create training that's engaging and meaningful to our learners? The difference between the two of those, at least for me, is the how might we, that I immediately get excited about. And when you frame it that way, I immediately start thinking about what are some answers and some ideas I might be able to come up with. And so the how suggests that we don't know the answer yet. But the might says that this could be one solution or a problem, but it's not the only one. It's keeping it pretty general. And we is that collective unit, that collaboration, that together we're going to be able to come up with an approach to help solve this. So how might we? Once we have our problem statement, or how might we questions, then we move into the ideation phase where we brainstorm, we come up with lots of great ideas. And it's not about coming up with the right idea. It's about coming up with the broadest range of possibilities. So some approaches, and there's really no wrong methodology to ideation. The four that I tend to use are brainstorming, storyboarding, sketching, and then mind mapping, which you'll see in the lower left-hand corner there. And so some best practices to share with you. So first of all, set a time limit so people know what they're working towards, and stay on topic. When you're ideating, I like to have the how might we questions. If we're in the room, I have them on the walls so people see them. If we're virtual, I have them on the mural tool that we use. It helps you to stay on topic by having them in front of you. It's absolutely imperative to defer judgment and criticism. The word no does not exist. As soon as you shut somebody down and you say, that's a stupid idea, that'll never work, they're done. You might as well stop the ideation session at that point and come back at the fresh start, because you've already shut someone down. So you've got to defer that judgment or criticism. Encourage those weird, wacky, wild ideas. That's what creates innovation. Include people from outside the team. This is the best practice recommendation I could give you in terms of ideation. When you are trying to solve problems with the people you already work with, you're going to come up with the same ideas you already had. You have the validations, you have all the reasons why it failed before, you have the historical context. Bring in fresh blood, bring in new thinkers who don't know all the reasons why it failed before, all the reasons why the client may say no. We don't want to focus on that. We're just focusing on different ideas at this point. Build on each other's ideas. It's yes and. Again, the word no does not exist. Be visual. Draw. If you can't draw, just write, but describe it enough, and create constraints. Constraints spur innovation. So you could spend 10 minutes on solving the how might we question with how might we solve this with $1 if that was our budget. 10 minutes later, what if we had a $10 million budget? So create different constraints to spur different ideas and how you might solve the problems. I'm going to skip this one in the essence of time, but if you have any brainstorming best practices, put them in the chat for me so I can learn too. Prototyping. So empathy, define, ideate. Now we're in prototyping, where we build quick representations of one or more of those ideas. So there's two types of prototypes in design thinking. There's low fidelity and high fidelity, or rather, not in design thinking. In design thinking, we focus on low fidelity, but in terms of prototypes, there's two that exist: low fidelity and high fidelity. Low fidelity is quick, cheap, or free, and it doesn't take long to create. The concept of prototyping in design thinking is about creating a minimum viable product, MVP. All you want to do is give your customers enough features and functions so they can provide feedback to you, so they can tell you if you're on the right track. Your job is not to create a full working functional tool that stands on its own, that costs a lot of money, that took a lot of time, because then you might find out that's not what we wanted. And then you've wasted time, effort, money. So we want just enough functions and features so that they can provide feedback. Here's a quick example. Let's say we were trying to build a transportation tool. We can't just give them a wheel, because a wheel isn't going to be able to transport something, unless, of course, it's a unicycle that you know how to ride. Very few people know. So then maybe you evolve the wheel to a frame. It still can't transport something. But if you had something like a skateboard, it's something small. It's something that they can use, or you can try it out and you can move an object from point A to point B. Okay, that works. We like that, but now we need something that has a little bit more stability. So then we build the next option, which is a scooter. Still, you can transport from point A to point B. Then it evolves to a bike. So each one of these phases, it's functional and they can provide feedback. Here are some quick examples of prototypes that I've actually used in design thinking before. And here's a famous example of a prototype. This is Apple's iWatch, and this is what they did to create the iWatch initially. They're not going to, of course, go right to production to create these. They don't know if people actually wanted to use it. So literally, they created a prototype by slapping the iPhone on a wristband and giving people something to react to. And then at last, of course, we have test. And this is where you go out and you test your ideas with your users, test your prototypes. Best recommendation here, consider bringing new people into the testing phase. I'll share with you from experience, having been through this a number of times, I tend to get emotionally attached to the ideas that I come up with. And so I find that there's a little bit of bias when I'm testing with my users because I want to coach them. I want this to be the right idea because this is the idea that my team came up with and we've spent time developing. So bring in new people to support the testing phase so they don't have that emotional connection. Have your learners, your users talk through the experience of using the prototypes. Your job is just to actively observe them, watch how they're using or misusing your prototype. Do not correct the user. This is their perception. This is their reality. If they're using it incorrectly, it's a design issue, not a user issue. And then follow up with questions. Figure out what do they like? What do they don't like? What would they change? What worked for them? What didn't work for them? So some final thoughts for you in terms of design thinking. First of all, it's not a solution for every problem. Like I said, this is a tool that goes into our toolkit that gets used fairly sparingly. It's like a hammer. End users are our priority. In this case, in this context, learners are our priority. They should be the focus of everything that we do. We need to make sure that learners remain in focus for us, which means we have to do a lot of consulting, a lot of coaching with our business partners, with our customers, so that they are seeing the learners as being in the forefront of learning solutions and delivery. Design thinking initiatives are quick. It can take as little as maybe a half a day, which is a super quick sprint, to maybe 3 weeks. You don't really want it to go beyond 3 weeks because at this point, your business partner, your customer might actually go out and try and find their own solutions because you're taking too long, or the business problem may have started to evolve. So these are quick and they're iterative. And then last, create a place to continue fostering design thinking. Don't let this stop here. Don't let this stop with the next section. Create a place to continue this discussion with your colleagues, with your friends, so that you are continuing to explore what are different use cases. For example, at GM, we've created the Innovation Garage, where we meet monthly to talk about business problems and business challenges and look for opportunities to bring in design thinking as a tool. So I'm going to skip this knowledge check real quick because there's a couple of things I want to talk about. And that is, we have some design thinking resources to share with you. So it's a 2-page document of all of my favorite resources. The first one in there is a link to this website here that's free. These are all of the podcasts, all of the articles, all of the tools that both Tiffany and I have created over the last few years that are available for everyone to use. So that's the first link in there. Then there are a number of other links. What I recommend that you do next on your journey, besides attending the next session, is spend some time researching use cases of design thinking. And in fact, I've already done a lot of that legwork for you. So check out the links for the PDF that Tiffany is loading now. There is one blog particularly that has 40 design thinking success stories in there. So part of the challenge that we have is when we are trying to encourage our business partners to maybe use design thinking is that we have to get them on board. One of the best ways to do that is to talk about how other organizations are using design thinking successfully, so that we're not just putting forth our belief, we're saying, look, it is demonstrated in this way, in this way, in this way, in this industry, in this approach. And the best way to do that is to build up your repertoire of understanding design thinking success stories. And so those links are all in there. Check it out. So that's all my links on page 1. On page 2, these are all resources to help you with conducting design thinking initiatives or workshops with your own organizations. So those will be very helpful resources. 2 other things. Add me on LinkedIn. I'm extremely active there. Would love to hear more from you in terms of how you're using it or the challenges you're having with it or questions that you may have that we didn't get to today. So add me on LinkedIn. Also, I have a podcast ahead of tomorrow where we talk about design thinking. We talk about workforce of the future. Just the whole purpose of the podcast is helping to develop skills and discussions that are going to help us be prepared for tomorrow. With that, there is part 2 of this that's coming up in 2 weeks. and that is the design thinking use case at General Motors. So we did a research there on the learner experience and how might we improve the learner experience from that continuous improvement perspective. And so I go through step by step what we did in each of the phases so you can see how this actually works. And we talk about the challenges that we had in the phases and then also the successes that have come from it. Following that, Tiffany, who has been our fantastic moderator today, will be conducting a session on the learner experience boost, quick wins that you can begin applying today to help improve the learner experience for, of course, your learners. With that, I know we're right at 2 o'clock. I'm happy to stay on and have some more conversations and answer any questions. I know many of you will probably have to drop off, so thank you for joining today. But for those that want to stay on and ask some questions, the floor is yours. So if you will click the raise hand option, Tiffany will give you a shout out.
Keith, just to preface some of these questions, there has been an overwhelming popular request for the slides. Is that something you would be comfortable sharing if folks were interested?
Yes, we can share a PDF version of it.
Fabulous. Okay, so should folks reach out to you on LinkedIn then to request those?
Yes.
We could also, if I could jump in, we could also send out, usually we send out like a follow-up email to the sessions. We could also include that.
Oh, great. I know that there were some questions about the recording. I know some people were very interested. So go ahead and
yes,
drop
and
off.
this was recorded, right? Zico?
Yes,
yep.
Yes,
absolutely. Someone did ask for the scan, so if we can just leave that up. Any other hands? I see Carlene's hand is up. Carlene, what was your question? Go ahead.
And Carlene is a member of the board, so I'm going to put that out there.
Hey, Zizo.
Hey, Carlene, how are you?
Question to you both. Is it necessary, or how necessary, I should ask you, to utilize the software? I was introduced to the sprint-based software for design thinking. If one wanted to adopt the design thinking approach in our organization, is it necessary to utilize that software?
Not at all. In fact, I know the software you're talking about, but I've been a practitioner for 4 or 5 years and I've never used a software for the entire journey. I have used things like Mural and Miro for the ideation phase, if we're virtual, for brainstorming, but I have not used and don't advocate that you need a software tool for design thinking at all. Design thinking is fluid, it's flexible. You know, I've used, Excel and Word to help code the data that we find out of the empathy phase. But those are the tools, Miro, Mural, but no, the answer to your question is no.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The question, let's see who else might be still around and raising their hand. Let's see here. I don't see any more hands raised. If anyone does have, nope, that's still Carlene's.
All right.
Any other hand raisers that I maybe don't see or would like to just speak out? Now's your time.
Tiffany, I see one hand.
Do you see a hand?
Yeah, Vion, if I pronounced that properly.
Please, go ahead.
Maybe.
You want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Vion? Happy to hear from you.
All right, well, while Vion is unmuting.
I'm so sorry, I'm back here.
Oh, no worries.
How can we, so one of the questions that is termed for learning and development is how do you take out the ROI out of the sessions and trainings that you do? Can design thinking help us find a solution to that?
So let me make sure I understand the question. You're talking about evolving from the focus of ROI in L&D. Or are you talking about ROI from a design thinking initiative?
No, I'm asking about a solution that we can get from design thinking to ensure that there is a return of investment on learning hours given by employees and learners.
Great question.
Can we use design thinking to help drive or help identify and uncover the ROI from a learning and development program?
Exactly. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would use that for that use case. So first of all, ROI is such a sticky topic for L&D, and I understand that many organizations that's their focus. In fact,
This is Barry.
that is my. Hey Barry, you're on.
Oh,
please mute.
sorry.
That's okay. So this is actually the topic of my dissertation in my doctoral program at the University of Pennsylvania. Is understanding if the chief financial officers understand a correlation with learning and development organizations and ROI on the organization itself. So based on the research that I'm doing right now, I would say that so for me, I'm not using design thinking in my research, but I guess you could if you were trying to explore what other organizations are doing, or if you're trying to come to an understanding or an agreement about what is ROI actually. So for example, is ROI the financial savings? Could it be a cost savings from the program? Could it be the performance improvement or performance support? And do we see a cost result or cost benefit from that? It could be the overall ROI from our learning organization. So in fact, it's a great question because maybe I'm going to go back and look at my dissertation. So the answer to your question is, I would consider it if I was trying to come to a clear definition of what ROI meant for my organization. But if you already have a clear understanding of what it is, and you're just literally trying to find the financial aspect, the dollar signs, no, I would say design thinking is not a good use case because you already know what the problem is. You know the problem is you need to figure out what the value is. If the problem is how do we define value, how do we define what ROI means, then that is the good use case for it. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, certainly. Thank you so much.
Sure. We'll stick around for one more. Anybody else, Tiffany?
Anyone else? Let's see. I don't see any hands, but if anyone wants to speak out with a question or comment, experience, complaint.
All right. Well, with that, thank you, Tiffany, for your support today. I appreciate it. Thank you, Zizo.
Anytime.
And thank you, everyone else, for sticking around for some additional questions. And we hope to see you in the next phase, which is the use case, which will be in 2 weeks, same time.
Thanks so much. Have a great
Thanks,
afternoon.
everyone. Thanks, Keith.
Bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tiffany.
Anytime.